Damn it.
You're right.
New Alliance Records. That's what it was called.
Oh, sure. Yep. I got records from that label. Was Tom Tricoli walking around the household there?
So there's Tom Tricoli's dog. I'm trying to think. So I was there like sort of the last hurrah. So this is the stat that I always like to. I got there and I think they were on release number 35. And when I left, like I want to say I wasn't there for 15 months, and they were release number 200.
Oof. Yeah, they were breaking out records.
That was one of that's almost kind of what killed the label, right? So Greg always put the money back into signing more bands, and so at one point, I mean, there must have been 40 bands. It was just like they put out. I don't like. I'll be impressed if you know any of these bands. There was a guy by the name of Zoog's Rift.
I remember that name. Yep.
Zoog's had like been cranking out DIY records for years, and Greg just like, yeah, let's reissue them, and it must have been like 30 titles, and it was just like, it was, and then in retrospect, what ended up happening, and I'm just talking, this is all hearsay, so I don't know what the facts of it are, but what ended up happening is it turns out Greg. This is what the band's accused that Greg wasn't paying royalties.
John, if you're worried about us getting sued in some respect, I think we crossed that line a long time ago.
This is a known story. This is a known story. So it's just but I'm just telling you this is the bits and pieces I heard, and I could tell you the facts of the results. So apparently, nice. The band's accused that Greg was not paying royalties, and what happened is the reason there is. So the only thing really left on in the Black Flag catalog is the unknown stuff, Black Flag, and Minutemen stuff, because Minutemen, Dinosaur, Sonic Youth all got their masters back because they said, you never paid me my royalties. And Greg was actually, I remember speaking to him about it. He was hurt because he's like, well, this was about putting money back in and putting in more records. Land Speed record, very nice.
Yes. Yep.
Now I think
that's New Alliance. So that's New Alliance San Pedro. So that's why I say.
Okay, so so going back to that story really quickly. So yes, Minutemen, Husker Du was signed by the Minutemen to their label, and that's how they ended up on SST. So they put out the first. So it was really those guys who brought in Husker Du, which is you think about it. I mean, Black Flag was a powerhouse and did really well for solid state transistors. By the way, Tony, did you know it's that Greg Ginn with a ham radio, and still is, I think, a ham radio guy, and has patents. Like he's a.
I think I might have. Yeah, that might have been I might have known that fact years ago.
He used to sell stuff out of his house, his parents' house, for solid state transistors, and then when Black Flag couldn't get a record deal, he's like, okay, I'll turn it into a record label. So it was really, that's where it came from, and so the guys in Red Cross always used to joke all the time that they've never seen Greg Ginn and Tom Scholz from Boston in the same room.
Yeah.
So as a result, they think that Tom Scholz and Greg Ginn are the same guys.
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy, and that's why, because solid state transistors, and the guy who invented the Rockman.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same dude.
And played like everything on the first Boston record.
Oh yeah, more than you're feeling
in his basement. Honestly, right?
No. The garage, I thought it was. I believe those.
Okay, garage basement.
Yeah, I believe those tracks were recorded in the garage, and they were so professional that they just
to
the master.
The Boston demo, that first album.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So keep going with the story of SST Records and the royalty stuff.
Well, well, I mean that's the quick version of it is so Greg was sort of hurt, and that he's like, well, wait a minute, we took the money from your records and we put out more records. Like he very much thought of it as a this is Greg.
Are you a Greg Ginn sympathizer?
No. This is the story.
He's a label guy, Chris. Let me remind you.
No, I'm just trying to say I've heard both sides of the story. So I'm trying. So Greg, because Greg, I got to tell you, when I was at Roadrunner Records, I got one of the scariest calls. Greg calls me up, and he was so pissed at me.
Now he knows you, but when he's calling you at Roadrunner.
He's like, John, I gave you your first job in this business and you fucked me over like this. Is it something like that?
Greg would never speak that for his nickname was Lurch. He was not a fast talker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was Greg. All he cared about was like, well, he was playing guitar, playing basketball, smoking weed.
Right.
Like,
well, that's why he had a good ear for signing bands. He just didn't, couldn't keep track of the money.
He would literally play
businessman.
guitar 8 hours a day, go play basketball, and smoke up all the time. Like, and he like, I mean, as Henry Rollins would say, it's like he's like the only guitar player I ever knew who drooled. Like,
while he was playing, it was disgusting.
He was just, But Greg was like he very much like lived in like very shabby place. But if you think about all of the, we're talking. Imagine the money from two double records that sold over 100,000 copies to an indie label, right? All of a sudden you're swimming in like millions, right? You have millions in cash. It's coming
Where's our modern day Alan Klein to swoop in there, say, I'm going to fix everything for you, Greg. You just keep signing bands and I'm going to take everything.
All of that. He got screwed bad by MCA. MCA Records was going to put out the Damaged album. And MCA, like literally, it was about to come out. It was like, it was a big deal. Like they were going to be the LA punk rock band. And I don't mean this in a slick, like it was, Black Flag, that exact record. And then someone's parents or something like that was on Unicorn.
X is already out there on Slash. Come on.
Yeah, but we're talking hardcore punk, I guess, is the thing, right?
Like X is produced by Ray Manzarek.
Right.
So
I mean, but that's like they're so anti-commercial as well. Let's face it. Like right from the get-go, right there, like Ray Manzarek does it, and literally Soul Kitchen is that their biggest AOR? Like whatever, middle of the road MOR
ever.
Like, what's a big? What would have got the most airplay for normal people? House of
Burning Love and 4th of July.
But I think you're talking about, Chris. I think you're talking about like, in the grand scheme of,
there is
in the grand scheme of things, right? They're on the radio. They're eventually getting MTV videos, and they've got Ray Manzarek producing. We're talking about, remember, hardcore was underground. Kids.
I want to take Riley, or rather Rasto, to task about, like, he's got problems with LA punk rock, period. So, like, let him finish his spiel.
Let's finish your story, one segment first.
Right now, okay?
You're the Mike Watt of the podcast. Go ahead, keep spieling.
Torspiel.
Right. So you tell us Greg Ginn's side of the story. He was.
You were
talking about MCA.
Reds. So MCA has this label that they're going to put out. They're going to put out Black Flag, and it's called Unicorn. And like some executive, saw some stupid story in the LA Times, or about punkers, and like, I don't know, saw them on Donahue or something. I don't know, one of those talk shows, and said he's like, there's no way we're going to put this out. This is anti-parent, but out of it they got their masters back. And that was the birth of SST Records. Like essentially, like I got it back, and so like Greg was like completely against it. Like so going back to I leave LA in '88. I go, and my first gig is at Roadrunner Records, and I'm running a label called Emergo that has Gangrene on it, has the Neighborhood. No, the Neighborhood's one on Emergo, I think. But there's a label called Hawker Records that's like a punk rock label, and there's Emergo, which is like the alternative label, and then there's Roadrunner, which is the the metal label with King Diamond. And so we're all in this little office on Lafayette in the thing, and I get this call from Greg Ginn going, John, it's Greg. It's I can't believe you're working. He's like, you're working with Case Wessels, who wrote Roadrunner Records. Either you're the enemy now. You know that. It's like, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Case Wessel owes us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because apparently Roadrunner was the SST distributor for the Black Flag records, at least in Europe. He was also the distributor for Metallica outside the U.S. until they got signed to Elektra. And so Case is, and he's I would say he's Dutch. But so Greg's like really pissed. And so next time I have lunch with Case, who's actually in Holland, and he comes to visit when I'm pretty regularly, I have lunch. I'm like, I got this really bad call from him. He's like, well, there was a dispute with Metallica about royalties, and so I couldn't pay Black Flag their royalties. And
he's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
No, his thought was, I can't. Once I distribute royalties to any of the artists,
everybody's going to want
and
them.
Everyone's got to get paid. And it was because until the suit with Metallica was resolved, he wasn't going to be able to release those royalties. So, I mean, yeah, I mean.
So I'm going to ask another to back a second. What is this guy's background? He's like the son of somebody with a lot of money, or is he a gangster?
I have no idea. Generally, all of these people that I've dealt with are like, he was probably a kid who got into just picking up U.S. albums, just at a time when it was a good time. Like because I don't think he was a metal fan, but he would import records from the U.S. that weren't out in Europe and put them out in Europe. And he just became the guy, It's like most all these stories. It's like Billy Crystal opened a bluegrass bar on the Lower East Side. He loved bluegrass music, and he wanted a bluegrass place. And then fucking television walked in the door, and it's like, okay. And he you know what I mean? And like, it was just another one of those stories. And this was a time where, I mean, the thing that I'm going to sound like the old man again is that pre-internet, it was like you would like you dig through the classifieds, and you have your fanzines, and you did the work, and you sort of and then certain people who were just like us, you just all of a sudden, and frankly probably people who had a more desperate solution. It's like, well, it wasn't like they tried, like, I'm going to be a record distributor. It was kind of like, I'm going to put out anything, and they happened to strike a vein of oil, and then they became the punk rock guy, Right. And I just heard this interview with the the brother of the Copeland, Stuart Copeland, Copeland. Ian Copeland is his brother, about how he was just, he ended up managing like Climax Blues Band, and I forget the other band he managed, right? And they were on Sire Records. And I'm hearing this interview with a separate interview just a few weeks later with the guy from the Strangeloves, who also produced the first Blondie record, and he did the Go-Go's album, Richard Goddard. Right, this producer, and he was the partner in Sire Records with Seymour Steins. Their initials make Sire, and Seymour Stein starts signing punk rock bands. He signs the Ramones, he signs the Talking Heads, and Ian Copeland's like, look, we have your biggest band, the Climax Blues Band. Stop with this punk rock shit, right? And then of course his brother starts the Police. And he signs the Go-Go's to IRS and has Richard Goddard produce it. And he's like, you ruined this punk rock band. Right. So it's like, talk about someone who's just like if you had listened to him early on, your record would have been a failure, but he ends up with like the biggest female act of all time. The Police, probably one of the biggest acts of all time. Yep. He pioneers essentially touring. He doesn't really he's not really involved with Blondie, but he has IRS Records. He starts IRS Records, which essentially, he says what happens, he ends up sharing an office with Malcolm McLaren, and starts booking Sex Pistols shows, because Malcolm McLaren says, yeah, he kept saying him in the press, saying, we're banned, we can't get shows anywhere. So Ian Copeland's like, well, I'm going to get you shows, I'm going to impress Malcolm McLaren, and I'm going to get a good gig out of this. And so he goes, hey, I got a show for you there. He's like, oh, we can't do that one, we can't play that show. And he's like, well, okay, I got you another show. He's like, yeah, no, we're busy that day, we can't do that. And he comes back in, he's like, oh, I got his third show, here's another day, and if you can't do that day, they'll give you another day, they're dying to book you guys. He's like, You fucking idiot. Do you know when I go to the press and I say they can't play, they get far more press than if they actually do a gig? So